What could you do to protect your pets if you're sick or injured? My product, Save My Pet ID tag, helps you ensure that your beloved pets are safe and well cared for, even when life isn't what you expect.
Our special guest is Professor Mark Rowlands. Check him out. He's at the University of Miami in Florida. He has very, very, very strong typing fingers. He's written almost 24 books. And his latest book, it is called, it's called The Word of Dog, What Our Canine Companions Can Teach Us About Living a Good Life. And I hope, Professor Mark, that you're going to get a little inspiration credit to your German Shepherd, Shadow.
Yeah, Shadow is the one who got me thinking about the stuff which eventually turned into this book. And it all started really on daily walks. There's a canal that runs behind my house, and we go out there every day, and lined up along the bank in the mornings will be iguanas of various types, lined up at fairly regular intervals, and Shadow will charge off for hundreds of yards up the canal. The iguanas peel off into the water, swim to the other side, and then stay over on the far bank for the rest of the day. But then nighttime is apparently a time when iguanas forget things, because the next morning they'll be back on our side, lined up, ready for the hole.
So you're saying that iguanas have short-term amnesia?
Short-term amnesia or short-term memory, I'm not sure which.
And I do sense from your book, you have a little soft spot for these green iguanas, because you've named a few. Give people some of the names that you've named, because you've seen these guys, and you've got some clever names for them.
Well, yeah, there was Cocky, who was always the last. He was very, very confident, always the last to jump in.
He's probably going, nah, Shadow.
Pretty much, yes. Yeah, pretty much. And then there was Bolt, who was named because unfortunately he had crossbow bolt sticking out of his ribs. Didn't see.
There's your British humor coming out. Okay, keep going.
But my favorite was Big Poppy. He was huge. He was 5 to 6 feet long. I thought he was a gator when I first saw him out of the corner of my eye, by the fright. But I did come to think of them as our iguanas, so naming them was a natural extension of this.
Well, your book is called The Word of Dog, and I'm a big Mark Twain fan. And I know he's been quoted as saying the dog is a gentleman. I hope to go to his heaven and not man's. I want to ask you quote in your book, you quote the Greek philosopher Socrates, you quote Albert Camus, you talk about a lot. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my brain is hurting. But I read your book. But what is it about dogs, and specifically your German Shepherd, Shadow, that did inspire you to take a pause, not a paw, a pause, and say, you know what? They're natural philosophers. What do you mean by that?
Well, on the canal, when Shadow was doing his daily trick of exiling the iguanas, it struck me after a while, because, wheels turn slowly sometimes, but after a few years of doing this, it struck me that, well, this is a lot like the myth of Sisyphus. So Sisyphus, a mortal, he offended the gods in some way, and they punished him by making him roll a large rock up a hill for forever. When the rock gets to the top, he gets to the top. The rock rolls back down, he starts all over again. So it struck me that this activity of Shadow was very much like Sisyphus. No matter how many times he exiles the iguanas to the other side, the very next morning they're back again, and he has to do the same thing all. Now, interestingly, Sisyphus, when he's brought up, is brought up as a sort of the epitome of a meaningless existence, just repetitive activity that feeds nothing, aims only at its own continuation. But it struck me, and this was the intuition that made me write the book, I think, ultimately. This was the best part of Shadow's day. This was the most meaningful part of Shadow's day.
Yeah.
So the idea was, if Shadow can find meaning in this, then he must, in some sense, have solved the challenge of Sisyphus. Even though he had no idea that such a challenge existed, because he is, of course, a dog. Right. And so I became obsessed with how he managed to do this. What's the difference between Shadow and us, such that he could find meaning in this activity, whereas for us it would be the epitome of a meaningless life?
Well, you also talked about when your boys were younger, you would say to Shadow, hey, Shadow, time to pick up my son at school. And he wasn't going to a dog park. He wasn't getting one of those nice little frosty dog things at Starbucks. He would tell us about that, because it was just to go pick up your son. There was no penny really for Shadow other than what? So tell us about that.
Yeah, no, he's lying right here next to me, actually. So
Telling you to say it, Daddy.
I hesitate to utter those words but no, I would say, Shadow, do you want to come with? And then would start bouncing around, hurling himself around the house. Sometimes he'd find his leash, and sometimes he'd manage to leash himself by tossing it up in the air and inserting his head,
Well, that's a German Shepherd. They're smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he knows, as you say, he is smart. And he knows, because he'd been doing this for years. Nothing interesting was going to happen. We weren't going to any dog parks. We weren't going for a run or anything like that. We were just going to drive across Miami, pick up my son, and come back. And that was it. But you would think, the greatest thing in his whole life had just happened to him every time I said this. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Why can't I feel like that? And again,
this is just pure joy, pure bliss.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't with big expectations, right?
No, I mean, Shadow is a smart dog, and he knows what's coming next. He knows exactly what's coming next. But it's this ability to take, at best, this was marginally positive. He was getting out of the house for a while. He could have a look out of the car windows we drove. Marginally positive. But it's this ability to take pleasure in such delight in the marginally positive. That's what interested me. Because it seems that's something we struggle to do. And I was struck, this is a sadder sort of example, but I was struck recently, back in April of last year, I was out running with Shadow, and he gave we were a couple of miles away from home. He gave a loud shriek and dropped to the floor, and his back legs were completely paralyzed. The vet thinks it was a spinal embolism, so a bit of cartilage had worked its way into his blood supply to his spine, and the result was he was paralyzed for about 5 minutes or so. And the thing he did when this happened always kind of struck with me, because I think it speaks to the idea of the marginally positive. And so when he fell, he was lying in the sun. And Miami sun, unpleasant for a dog. So what he did was he wouldn't let me anywhere near him because he was terrified, but he used his front legs to drag himself into the shade, about 20 feet into the shade. And what's the sort of guiding kind of theme? Well, it's okay, this is awful, right? I'm paralyzed, I don't know what's going on. But at least in this minute, I'm marginally better off than I was in the previous minute, because I'm out of the sun. I think there's something to that humans can and probably need to learn.
I think so too. Hey, we're chatting with Professor Mark Rowlands, and he is at the University of Miami. He's written a number of books. The favorite, it just came out. It's called The Word of Dog, What Our Canine Companions Can Teach Us About Living a Good Life. Lord, we need our dogs more than ever now. So we're going to dive in a little bit deeper, because there's basically 4 tenets or 4 points that we might have the good professor identify, but we're going to take that quick break. So sit, stay. We'll be right back.
Hey, have you heard? Four-Legged Life has a new digital newsletter. Here, let me show you how you get yourself subscribed. So you just type in Four-Legged Life, and that'll take you to the website. There we go. And this magic thing just appears, and you type in your email address. I'll use, let's see, how about coolestdogever@gmail.com. That's me. And then you just click on this thing here. There you go. It's the new digital newsletter from Four-Legged Life. Get subscribed today.
Our special guest is Professor Mark Rowlands, and he is at the University of Miami. He's written a number of books. The latest is called The Word of Dog. I can just see now everybody getting tattoos now, your inspiration. But Professor Mark, you talked about the fact that there are 4 tenets. Maybe I'm using the wrong word, but you say dogs are natural philosophers because, and I want you to explain that, and then we'll go to the other 3, if you don't mind.
Yeah, originally Socrates said dogs were natural philosophers, but I think he was just joking. It was a bad pun on Socrates' part, but I think there's something to it, actually. And
yeah, I do too.
And it's not that, let's do a bit of philosophy. It's not like that. It's rather that in the way they live, they can help cure certain philosophical afflictions that have come over us, if you like.
Yeah.
Philosophy is a bit like parvo, but whereas parvo affects only dogs, philosophy affects humans, but it is an affliction, I think. And dogs can be the cure if you know how to look.
Well, I took a philosophy course in college at Purdue, and I got a C plus. It was my lowest score in my class. But I just remember, I think it was Confucius might have said, to know what you know and to know what you don't know, that is true knowledge. And I just remembered in I always needed to start answering my essay questions on test with always a question. But I mean, I think sometimes we don't have to know everything. Dogs don't know everything.
No.
And I just wondered, what would Confucius say about dogs?
Well, the great thing about dogs is that they know things, but they don't know that they know things. And that's because they lack an ability that we have. We're very keen on this ability. We think it makes us great. But in fact, existence is always like swings and roundabouts. There are always benefits and drawbacks to any sort of development. So what I have in mind is the ability that's sometimes called reflection. It's the ability to think about yourself. And
You talked about it. You have a chapter, Mirror, Mirror.
Yeah. So it's the ability to think about yourself, about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And as soon as you do that, your life kind of splits into two. You know, there's the life that you live, but there's the life that you think about, that you scrutinize and evaluate and agonize over. And so we humans, we always have these two lives. Whereas a dog who doesn't do that sort of thing because his powers of reflection are sort of minimal compared to ours, just has this one life. And I think that's probably why it loves its life more than we love ours, because it only has this one life to live.
Well, you also said that, studies have shown, limited studies, that, when other certain animals look into a mirror, like maybe a chimpanzee or orangutan, they also recognize their reflection. But dogs are all about the nose, right? So they just see something. Maybe they don't see themselves in the mirror, but they know all about smell.
Yeah, no. One thing I do know from all the dogs I've lived with during my life is that dogs do not care one little bit about how they look in a mirror, And so whenever you're testing an animal for something, the first thing you should think about is motivation. Is an animal motivated to study how it looks in the mirror? Well, dogs are not. I mean,
they don't have personal stylists, right? They're not going to get beauty products.
Various dogs I've had have happily rolled in cow dung, and knowing that, and is a dog like that going to care how it looks in the mirror? I suspect not, So, but the other point that you make is that dogs are driven by scent as much as sight. In cases of many dogs, more by scent. So there have been very ingenious attempts to come up with sort of olfactory versions of the mirror test. So Mark Beckhoff is a biologist, lives in Boulder.
No, we've had him on our show.
You have? Okay. Yeah. So he came up with what colloquially became known as the yellow snow test. His dog Jethro urinates.
Don't eat yellow snow, pet pals.
Yeah, don't do that. So his dog urinates, leaving yellow snow. Mark puts the dog away, then relocates the yellow snow, and then looks at the amount of time his dog spends sniffing his own urine versus the urine of other dogs. And it turns out he spends a lot more time in the urine of other dogs. Does this mean he has a sense of self? That he recognizes urine as his? I think there are other explanations that don't
But no, I like that because it's more... Another thing you brought up in your book, The Word of Dog, is dogs find joy in simplicity. I mean, we can make our life far too complicated. We need to hit the pause button, pun intended, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And it's another drawback of this capacity for reflection. We become troubled creatures. I have this belief, the dog believes things. Shadow gets out onto the canal, believes there's an iguana close by, and then charges. That's a belief. But our beliefs are different because we have beliefs and we start worrying about them, fretting about them. I believe this, but should I? Do I have enough evidence to believe it or don't I? What will other people think of me if I believe this? And that's why our lives become complicated. It's this baleful capacity for reflection.
Yeah, just don't overcomplicate happiness.
Yeah, precisely.
Now, you also say that dogs find value in the unexamined life. They've got instinct. They got really good instinct. So what do you mean by that?
Well, the examined life is a life where you think about yourself and you wonder.
Woulda, shoulda?
Yeah, that sort of thing. Oh, I've done that. Could I have done it better? Should I have done something different? A dog is unlikely to say, well, I picked up this stick out on my walk this morning. Should I have picked up that other stick instead? It's not something that the road...
Or I got a second place in agility. If I would have gone through those little up and down that ramp, like 2 seconds faster, I would have won. They're not doing that, right?
Precisely, yeah. Yeah. So their lives are not examined in that sense. And, there's benefits to having an exam in life, but there's also drawbacks. And I was interested in the drawbacks.
The last one I wanted to ask about was, you say that love and commitment are the cornerstones of canine philosophy. We've had Socrates a long time. I've even been to Greece a bit, Parthenon, all that. Yay, toga man. But I'm kind of more of a champion of the dogs and their philosophy. What do you mean by that? Love and commitment are the cornerstones of canine philosophy.
So commitments, as I used it, was the basically about the lack of reflection. So you're committed to something, such as a belief, for example. When you don't think about it, you don't worry about it, you just act on it.
Yeah.
When you're committed that way, you have a kind of love, I think, for what you're doing. The creature who is more troubled, like we are, who worries about its motivations and its actions and whether it could have done things differently, can't love its life as much as a creature that's just committed to doing what it's committed to.
So they kind of were the probably inspiration for Just Do It by Nike.
Yeah, I think Nike could have run with that a bit more, a lot more dogs in Nike.
We could have made them a lot more money, Professor Mark. So, yeah. I mean, seriously.
Unfortunately, dogs don't wear sneakers, so,
No, they don't, thank goodness. I'm so glad. So you say, I know it's hard because it's just a brief show, and the book is something I want everybody to read and have their dog by their side and really just listen and reflect. But the word of dog, I really enjoyed it. My dogs are Kona and Emma. They hung out with me when we read the book. I think they actually turned the corner on a couple pages they really liked, because I think on page 38, you kind of had a bone to pick with Socrates, because you said that dogs don't do the self-examination with the mirror test. And Kona and Emma concurred.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
So what's your take-home message for people blessed to have a dog or two in their life?
Dogs will show you any number of things, and it's all to do, whether you see these things, it's all to do with the willingness to remain open to what they're trying to show you. I mean, it took me long enough. I've been walking Shadow on the canal for years before it finally twigged. Oh yeah, wait a minute. It's like, but eventually I got this. So it's remaining open to what your dog is showing you, and when you see kind of delight in even the most marginally beneficial, marginally attractive sort of circumstances, I think there's
riding with you to pick up your son at school.
Yeah, exactly. Delight in the marginally positive, I think that's something we can definitely learn from them.
Well, I don't know.
Life is overwhelming. It can be overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely. Just curious, as a cat, Professor Mark, what if you could have a different rebirth? Would you come back as a human or a dog?
That's a very good question. I don't think there's an answer, because I couldn't come back as a dog. It wouldn't be me. And so what we're imagining here is a case where a dog comes back, but we think it's me, but it's not really me, because I can't be a dog, unfortunately.
Darn it. I was trying to get you movie rights to the next book. I was trying. How do people find out about you and get their paws on your book, The Word of Dog?
Well, the book, that's easy. It's sold wherever books are sold, basically.
Yeah.
How do people get them? I have no social media. I just don't do it. I'm sorry about that.
Go say hi to him at the University of Miami, guys. He's there.
Sure.
Well, I really have enjoyed you being a guest on our show. I hope I try to impress you with my knowledge of philosophers. You
did. You certainly did.
No, I feel I'm a better human because of the dogs and the cats in my life.
Yeah.
And I think we need to pay a little more attention to them, because they can just make us a better human. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I agree completely.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm so glad we've had Professor Mark Rowlands from the University of Miami on our show. Get his book, The Word of Dog.
Thanks so much for making our tails wag by watching this guest interview from Arden Moore's Four-Legged Life. Four-Legged Life. Make sure to subscribe so you're up to date with all of our Four-Legged Life content.